Kakalosh Boker Tov, we're continuing with Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, 38.1. We started this yesterday, but we're just going to do the review just on the halacha. So it says, Amar Rava. Rava says, Hilchata, what is the halacha? Chametz bizmano. Chametz during the time of Pesach, ben bemino, ben shelo bemino. Doesn't matter whether it's mixed up with its same species or a different species. Asur, ya b'mashu. It's going to be asur with any amount, just like Rav Paskins. Now, if it's shelo bizmano, which means after Pesach, so ben bemino ben shelo mino, doesn't matter whether it got mixed up with something which is the same species or not, it's going to be mutar, it's going to be permitted, even if it does give taste, like the shita of Rabbi Shimon. The chametz shevarav of Pesach is not midoraita, so therefore, even if it's going to give taste, it's going to be permitted. Okay? Okay? Fine. So says the Gemara, Umiyamar Rav, Hachi, does Rav actually come and does he actually say this? He says, Vehamar Rava. Rava comes and he says, Ya Rabbi Shimon, Knasa Kanis, Hoil ve'avar alav ve'bal yireh bal yematzeh. It says over here that does Rava actually come and does he say, right, such a thing? Why? Rava said that what is Rava coming to try to say? Rava is coming to try to say, Vehamar Rava. So are you going to tell me that Rava just said that chametz shavar Pesach is not going to be prohibited just like Rabbi Shimon? Vehamar Rava. Rava said, Rabbi Shimon knasa kanis. That means even according to Rabbi Shimon, even if it's not going to be a biblical prohibition, which means the chametz which is after Pesach is not minat Torah, there's still a knas, there's a penalty, and the penalty makes it prohibited. Why? Since the person transgressed the bal yireh bal yematzeh, since he already transgressed this avera of bal yireh bal yematzeh, it's a problem. So answers the Gemara, hanemile, when are these words? Be'eneh, only if it's by itself. It's only if it's by itself, but if it's going to be with a mixture, then even Rabbi Shimon, he did not prohibit it, which means the knas, the penalty, is only if it was actually in itself, the way that it is, chametz. So this chametz, you left it over on Pesach, penalty, a fine, asur, you're not allowed to benefit from it. However, though, if it got mixed up with other things, so then it becomes permitted. As the Rava letameh, and Rava goes according to his reasoning. The Amar Rava, because Rava says, Ki avinam be Rav Nachman, when we were in the Bet Midrash of Rav Nachman, Ki avunaf ke shiva yomeh de Pischa, when they used to come out the 7 days of Pesach, and we used to be permitted of eating chametz, Amar lan, Rav Nachman used to tell us, Puku zvinu chamira divnei chela. Go and buy the seor of the goyim. Go and buy the leaven of the goyim. Which means that Rav Nachman said that you're allowed to have the chametz of a goy after Pesach. Now, even though he went and he transgressed it, obviously there's no problem. So this is like Rabbi Shimon, that he holds that that chametz shaval of Pesach is only mitam knas, and because of a penalty, and therefore chametz of a goy, which is aval of a Pesach, is you're allowed to even eat it, right? But there's no knas, there's no penalty. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, that it's a biblical prohibition, there was no difference between whether it's a goy of a Jew. So obviously this goes according to what we just said. Rava is going according to his reasoning because of Rav Nachman. So one more time, right? Chazara, you remember we said there was a shitat Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Shitat Rabbi Yehuda, chametz shavar of Pesach is doraita, because you learn it from lo yachel chametz. You're not allowed to eat chametz, and therefore mid deoraita, you're not allowed to eat the food after Pesach, right? That means we're talking about chametz that left was stayed over on Pesach b'isur, that you didn't sell it. You're not allowed to actually benefit from it, mina Torah. There is no difference between a Jew's chametz or a goy's chametz, according to Shitat Rabbi Yehuda. Again, and only in Shitat Rabbi Yehuda that we say that we don't learn the seor of achila from seor of reiyah. Remember, yesterday we learned that there was a concept called seor of reiyah and seor of achila. Seor of reiyah was velo yera'eh lecha seor. Lecha, yours, which means only your seor. Your leaven you're not allowed to see, but you are allowed to see the leaven of the goyim. So if you learn seor of achila from seor of reiyah, so therefore what happens? So too you're not allowed to benefit from your chametz, which was shevar of Pesach. But a goy's you're allowed to. But if you don't learn of that, then it's going to be prohibited. Now there was shitat Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon argued on Rabbi Yehuda, and he said that mitzad the Torah chametz shevar of Pesach you're allowed to benefit after Pesach. Because after Pesach, there's no problem. But what's the problem? Knas, a penalty. What was the penalty? How did you leave chametz over on Pesach? You were transgressed the biblical commandment of bal yireh bal yimatzeh. You're not allowed to have it found. Because of that, we give you a fine penalty. What's the penalty? Not allowed to benefit. But says Rabbi Shimon, that not benefiting is only going to be be'eneh. If it's be'ain, you could see it the way that it is. If it get mixed up, there's no problem. Plus, obviously, it's only going to be yours. Because if it's going to be a goy doesn't have a transgression of bal yireh bal yimatzeh. A goy is allowed to have chametz on Pesach. We're not allowed to have chametz on Pesach. So because of that, right, he's coming and he's saying that obviously Rava is going according to his reasoning, but Rava held like Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said you can go and buy all the chametz in Publix. Why? If it's owned by a goy, enjoy. No problem. Go buy it. There's no problem. There's no problem. There's no knas. So that was the psak of Rava. Okay, until here clear? Yeah? Okay. Amar Rav. Rav says, Kederot bePesach, yeah, yishaveru. What does that mean? When we're talking about now a kederav kli cheres, yeah, we're talking about of earthenware. So what are you supposed to do? A chametz. So you have to break it. Why? Because if the chametz is balua, if the chametz is absorbed inside of the earthenware, right, it can't come out. So therefore, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to come and you're supposed to break it. So says the Gemara, yeah, as follows. Yeah, ve'amai. Why do you have to break it? Lishinu achara Pesach, ve'la'ave behushlo b'minan. Leave it until after Pesach and then use it b'min misheno mino. If it's going to be min misheno mino, we said that it's not going to prohibit the food, even according to Rebbe. So what's the problem? So says the Gemara, yeah, he comes and he answers, right, because he says that after Pesach, it's not going to oser b'mashu. Okay, so therefore, use it for other objects, meaning that if it became chametz because of, let's say, bread crumbs or I don't know what, so now use it for chicken or use it for other things, which is not the same species. So answers the Gemara, gezerah dilma atu lemevad behu b'mino. No, it's a gezerah. If I'm going to come and I'm going to tell you, you know what, leave it, but only use it now for other objects. What's going to happen? It's a gezerah. The exact same thing, by the way, happens. There's the same exact gezerah. What happens if I have a pot which became non-kosher? Yeah, a pot in my house. Chas v'shalom became not kosher. Tevilah doesn't help to make it not kosher. Tevilah is only when you buy it new.
Right.
So tevilah kelim. Here we're talking about that it became not kosher. So you have to do agala. Can I leave it? Let's say it's kli cheres. Kli cheres means earthenware. It doesn't help agala.
No.
Can I just leave it in my house and then use it for something cold or use it for all these things? No. Why? Gezerah. The gezerah is maybe you're going to use it for something which is prohibited. Meaning I can't start coming and saying, no. You could use a pot. But you could use the pot for A, B, C, and D, but not for E, F, and G. No. You just go crazy. You can't do that.
What if you turn it into a plant outside?
That's something different. If you turn it into a plant and nobody's going to use it anymore as a pot, that's fine. But you can't use it as a pot even for cold food. No, he's talking about that, Mamash. You're going to put it as an earthenware vessel for plant. How do you call it? One of these plant potters. That's something else. Yeah, pottery. No, that's something else. That's fine.
You're the Kenishbar.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, but here we're talking about the case of, right? We're talking about the case of the for example, I'm going to use it for cold fruits, or I'm going to use it for cold foods, or for liquids.
Yes.
Yeah, anything of food, all these things are food. Why? Because maybe I'm going to come and bemet, I'm going to start using it for something prohibited. So they made a gezerah. Shmuel says, lo yishavru. You don't have to break these pots of cheres. Aval mashu lehu le'achaz mano, ve'avid behu ben mino mishel mino. Kam Shmuel says, you don't have to break it, but wait until after Pesach. Now, after Pesach, it's already after Zmano, meaning after the time of Pesach, you could do whatever you want with it, whether it's mimi mino or mimi sheno mino. So here it says that this is like that Shmuel is going to Shitato, that he holds a chazak Rabbi Shimon, and chametz after Zmano does not prohibit ta'arovet. Right? Remember, according to Shitat Rabbi Shimon, chametz shavar alav Pesach is mutar bana min Torah. It was only a knas. It was only a penalty that we gave them, that we said that you shouldn't benefit from it. So now this penalty was only if you actually see the chametz. But if it's already a mixture, there's something else, there's no penalty. So says Shemuel, if we go like Rabbi Shimon, and now you cook something in this pot, you don't see the chametz. There's nothing here in the chametz. The chametz is absorbed inside of the pot. So therefore what? You're allowed to cook with it whatever you want. Whether whether it's the same species, different species, same food, not type of food, doesn't matter. Do whatever you want with it. Yeah, no problem. But wait until after Pesach. You're not allowed to use it obviously on Pesach. As the Shmuel Tameh, and Shmuel goes according to his reasoning. The Amar Shmuel, but Shmuel says, Lanau de mizavne kande. To these people that used to sell new pots after Pesach, Ashvu zvinea kandaichu. Right? You have to make the proper price, right? And don't raise the prices. Vilo, and if not, tershinan lechu Rabbi Shimon. I'm going to paskin in the public like Rabbi Shimon. Right? Look at the power of what it was once upon a time, the rabbis. The rabbis had such a power that Shemuel went and he was able to tell all the people that sells pots in the cities, listen, Rabotai, after Pesach, what do people do? They raise the prices, right? For food, you raise the price before Pesach. Right. But for pots, you raise the price after Pesach. Why? After Pesach, everyone has to have new pots. Remember, the entire concept of metal pots, that's all new. Everyone used earthenware. You understand? So therefore, what happens? So you have the pots. Everyone has to get new pots after Pesach. So therefore, people would start picking up the price. Yeah, they're gouging the prices. So what do they do? Rabbi Shmuel came and he told them, listen, Rabotai, don't pick up the prices. If you pick up the prices, I'm going to go in public and I'm going to paskin like Rabbi Shimon. If I paskin like Rabbi Shimon, everyone's going to keep the same pots, and then you guys are going to lose all your money. You're not going to get nothing. Not only you get everything, you're going to lose. So why? Nobody needs to use. Why are you going to buy a new pot? Leave the same pots. Wait until after Pesach and use it for whatever you want. So therefore, yeah, I won't say anything, but you're not allowed to pick up your prices. You pick up your prices, you're finished. That's what Shmuel told him. So he says, says the Gemara, 1 second. Like what Ronen was just saying now. 1 second. Even without that, why do you have to start threatening and telling them, by the way, you're going to pick up your price? Even without that, just say very simple. Even without even talking to these guys. Come up and give a psak. By the way, everyone should know Rabotai. For Pesach, you guys don't need to know. You don't need, right? Nowadays, by the way, you should know the most famous rabbis. Right? Well, usually the controversial one. What's the most famous rabbis? They come up with lists. Yes. By the way, Rabotai, you don't need to have kashela Pesach, not for coffee, not for oil, not for mayonnaise, not for ketchup, not for the tomato paste, not for this. That's the best. Why? Because everyone comes and say, Baruch Hashem, Pesach is just like all year round. We don't have to spend extra money. Gamarnu. So why didn't he do that? From the beginning. He should have come, instead of even having a conversation with these pottery guys. Yeah? You without that. Just come and say, Rabotai, you should know nobody needs to get new pots. Everyone's going to love him. Shemuel Tzaddik, my friend. He saves me money. He's the best guy in the world. So answers the Gemara, Atre de Rav Hava. It was a city of Rav. And since it was a city of Rav, everyone had to paskin like Rav. And Shmuel never wanted to paskin leheter against Rav because of the kavod of Rav. So therefore, right, but in order to actually to refrain, right, from the socharim, right, from the people, in order to be mafkia dashar, but he used to threaten them. Meaning, the threat, it was there. But he would never dare go and paskin against Rav in his own city. Meaning, this was a city of Rav. So he would never go and have the audacity to come in the city of Rav and start, paskining. Yeah? That he wouldn't do. You understand? He wouldn't do that. Okay? So he says, Hahu tanuda detachu be-tichya. So there was a tanur, right, that they went and they started being moreach. They started, putting a spread, right, on shuman, right, of fats at the bottom of the tanur. Yeah, and then they baked the bread. Asra Rava bar Ilai lemechle lelifta. So Rava bar Ilai, he came and he prohibited to eat this bread, right, that was baked in this tanur, afilu b'mincha leolam, even with melach, forever. Right, that means basically since the bread had this taste of the shuman, he prohibited it, right, not only just with milk, but even by itself, right? And we're going to see why the Gemara says it now, okay? Why? Because maybe you're going to come and you're going to eat it with milk, which means bread in itself should be parve. You don't make milky bread and you don't make meaty bread unless you have a certain type of a tzura, a certain type of a fashion that everyone knows that it's milky. Why? Because people, imagine right now I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to buy challah rolls, and all of a sudden the challah rolls are meaty. Now Motzei Shabbat, right after we already had all the things, Suda melavim alka, I want to come and I want to have milky. So I'm going to, and all of a sudden I realize challah rolls are meaty, or vice versa. Imagine I have these challah rolls that are milky, right? They make them special from Shavuot, everyone loved them, and it continued all year round. They have milky challah rolls, right? And all of a sudden what happens? I want now all of a sudden to come and all of a sudden I'm going to come, I'm going to eat it on Friday night, and all of a sudden people say, wow, it's very, very good. No, like, you're eating this with all the, the liver and this and that. And all of a sudden somebody comes and he says, there's something wrong here. Something, something tastes too good. Sometimes, and then they find out what happens. It's milky. So because of that, you're not allowed to make the bread, not the meaty, not the milky. He said you're not allowed nothing. You're not allowed to make a meaty just in case you're going to eat milk. You're not allowed to milk you just in case you're going to eat it with meat. Okay? So therefore, the Gemara is going to come and ask.
Excuse me, Rav. But I'm allowed to put butter on the challah that was cooked in the oven, which is meat oven.
I didn't understand. What did you do? You
The-
made
the-
part of it bread?
No, the challah is cooked in the oven. The oven is meat.
Okay.
Am I allowed to put butter on the Sunday on this bread and eat it?
Yeah.
The challah is cooked in the oven,
If
meat
it's
oven.
cooked at the same time with meat or not?
No, not at the same time. Not at the same time.
Okay, so if it's not at the same time as meat, there's a special din to do with challah. That challah, right? Usually, if you cook something in a meaty oven, there are two things in a meaty oven, right? Or in a milky oven, there are two things. There's something which is called reicha and something which is called zeah. Reicha means that the steam comes up, right? And it will penetrate the other food. Reicha is only at the same time. If it's not at the same time, there's no problem of reicha. So then what problem is there? Zeah. Zeah is the same concept, that the meat will go up to the top of the oven. It gets absorbed in the top of the oven. And then when you put another food uncovered in the oven, that steam will come up, bring it back down, and will penetrate into the food. So zeah applies even one after another. There's a special din, though, by bread, which is brought down, whether it's a Gro Moshe and others as well, that bread is dry. It's not a liquid. Since it's dry, there's no liquid that comes up and penetrates and brings it down. So because of that, the bread, if it's going to be cooked in a meaty oven, as long as there's no meat there, it still stays kilu parve.
Okay, thank you.
You understand?
Thank you.
But if you would have it at the same time, or if it's cake and it's liquidy, then you have a problem. Because then it doesn't become meaty. You understand? Then it doesn't.
Understand. Okay, thank you very much.
So says the Gemara, Meitvei, so we have a question. En lashin et ha'isa bechalav, v'imlash kol hapat kula surah, mipnei ergel avera. So he said, 1 second, the question is that you cannot be machshid the oven in order to come and to bake it again. Because, for example, the question is that it says you're not allowed to knead. Lash is kneading, right? With a K, yeah? K-N-E-A-D, yeah? Knead. You're not allowed to knead the dough with milk. Now, if you did knead it, the entire bread is going to be prohibited, even if it's going to be by itself. Why? Because of ergel avera, maybe you're going to eat it with meat. Kayotzebo, the exact same thing. We're on Lamed Amubet 30b. Kayotzebo, en tashin et tanur be'aliyah. You're not allowed to come and you're not allowed to spread, to smear the walls of the oven with aliyah, which is basically the zanav of the kevis, the tail of the sheep. Yeah? V'imtash, now if you did do that, kol hapat kula surah, the entire thing is going to be prohibited. Al shiasika tanur, unless you're going to turn on the oven, right? And then hausak, but if you did do that, miyashari, it's going to be permitted. So there's a tufta derabba in light tufta. So there's actually going to be a prohibition, which means, and this is what I was going to tell you, another way of getting out of this problem is, for example, let's say I want to get rid of the zeah. What do I do? Right? Either you cover it or you burn the tanur. But you don't have to do a burning of a self-clean oven.
No.
All you have to do is turn on the oven and you turn it on for the full blast for half an hour, right? And that's it. And it's going to burn anything that was up there. So therefore, there's not going to be a problem. Now, that doesn't kosher it from meat to milk. We're not talking about meat to milk. We're not meat and milk. You have to self-clean. You understand? Or for Pesach, self-clean. Or if not, if there's no self-clean function, so then people permit putting it on the maximum for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, because you'll never cook, you'll never bake for 2.5 hours straight, the full blast on the maximum. So some people permit. If you do the maximum, so then okay, fine, right? You could always double wrap or triple wrap. That's another halacha. That's even in a treif oven. 100%. You have to degrease it beforehand. Beforehand, you have to actually clean the oven. With the kita grasa, how do you call it? With the bleach or all these greasers and all these things. You have to make it tam pagum, 100%. Okay. But the question that we're asking is here you see that even if somebody did come and they put on the walls of the oven this meat, there's no problem because all you have to do is turn on the oven, full blast, get rid of the grease, and then that's it. So why is Rabbi Bar Hanina coming and prohibiting the bread that was cooked in this oven forever, even after you actually come and you turn on the oven? Once the oven is on, right, and you get rid of all that grease on the sides, come on, you're allowed to use the oven again. So Amale Ravina Ravashi says Ravina to Ravashi, after you just asked on a question Rabbi Bar Ilai, right? That he comes and he says this, Amai Kamar Rav, why did Rav say, Kedirot b'Pesach yishavru? So according to you, so why did he say then that the Kedirot, you have to break the pots on Pesach? Right? Why? Just put them in the oven, right? And then it's going to take out all of the Yisur. So Amalei, he comes and he answers him, no. Hatam betanusha mitechet. There we're talking about that the oven was made out of metal. Metal is foletu mafliam, which means it absorbs, but it takes out. Right? Hacha, here we're talking about a kidra shel cheres. Cheres, earthenware, only absorbs. It doesn't let out. It doesn't let out. So there's a big difference between cheres, metal, right? Metal, you could always do hagala. Cheres, you can't do hagala. Hagala takes it out. Remember, what's the difference between hagala and libun? Right? There's also two types of libun. Libun kal and libun chamur. Libun kal is a light libun, fire. Libun chamur is a strict one. That's a self-clean. You understand the mamash? Right? What's the difference? Libun burns the yisur where it is. So that's why you don't even have to wait 24 hours to doing libun. Because the yisur is here, it burns. Boom. It burns the yisur, there's nothing left. Hagala does not burn the yisur. It only takes the yisur out. Since it takes the yisur out and it doesn't actually burn it, you have to wait 24 hours. So therefore, when it comes out, it doesn't have a good taste. So whenever you're doing hagala, you have to wait 24 hours. Right? That's why they always tell you for Pesach, right? What do you have to do? You have to come and you have to wait 24 hours before kashering. That's what the first thing. Now, if you can't wait 24 hours, the way that they do is they'll usually put a lot of soap, which gives a tam pagum in itself, right? So therefore, what's so funny?
That's so funny. It's just when you kosherize silverware
Yes.
for an event, you kosherize it in the afternoon.
Well, usually you have to remember that silverware in itself does not need a true hagala.
Right.
Usually silverware will only need yirui kli rishon. The reason why is because silverware is not actually used in a kli rishon on the fire. Meaning, think about it. You have to remember how do you become, meaning a pot, you cannot kosher a pot the same day of the event with hagala unless you either put a lot of soap or use a blowtorch. You understand? But that's a pot. That's a kli rishon. You have to actually do mamash hagala. Silverware, you could do yirui kli rishon, technically speaking. Saying unless you hold that the silverware is being used in the vargush, which the vargush is like a kli rishon, which is like a solid food, but that's for Ashkenazim. Technically speaking, silverware is always one level lower than anything else.
I want to prolong it, but it goes through a dishwasher. The temperatures are extremely hot.
Exactly. Well, by the way, you should know that, but that's also a question in itself. Because I still remember that when we checked last time and we were actually going to have that question, can I kasher in a silverware in a dishwasher? If I remember correctly, it doesn't get to 100 degrees. It gets into between 87 to 93 degrees Celsius. Celsius, always talking about. What?
It depends. There's two types of dishwashers. One
Oh, yeah?
that you put soap,
Right.
one that you don't need soap. The water gets to such a high temperature.
That for sure, that for sure gets 100 degrees Celsius?
I don't know,
Because remember, it has to, for hagala, you need to have boiling hot water, which means mamash. So I remember in Spain we looked into it, and I remember it didn't help.
The only thing that I'm telling you is they don't wait 24 hours.
Right, okay. Because again, many times if you have soap anyway, you don't have to wait. If you put a lot of soap in the tzava and all those things, many times on Erev Pesach they had to kasher. So that was Rav Nisim Karelitz and others, and many others, the Chazonish, others, they always put a lot of soap for Gamano. And that's what they used to do. So they used to put a lot of soap, and then that's it. And you're right. Many times we would do that if we needed to. You understand? Or blowtorch. Blowtorch is the easiest. Because blowtorch, you don't. There's no such thing. You don't have to wait that at all. You understand? So that's the first answer. So the difference between metal and earthenware. For you can answer another answer. Here we're talking about the earthenware. It all depends where's the fire. Is the fire on the inside or is the fire on the outside? Okay. If you're going to tell me achenami, so too that we're going to do the asaka on the inside. Right? You're still going to be afraid because maybe it's going to get destroyed because of the heat, which means this is another general rule brought down, whether it's in the Pri Megadim and other places as well. If I have to do hagala or libun, but I'm afraid that it's going to get ruined, for example, they speak about this with tefal, all the things that have tefal, right? A frying pan, right, have a non-stick coating. Right now, technically speaking, a frying pan is worse than a pot because a pot usually you use it with liquids. Yes. So you do hagala. A frying pan, if you use no liquid at all, no oil at all, or even if you use maybe it's a minute amount of oil, or sometimes they use a spray and that's it. So now you have a problem because then you would need libun. Right now, if you do libun, it doesn't help putting it in hot water. Right. You have to use a blowtorch. If you're going to use a blowtorch on that coating, you're going to destroy it. So what happens? If you're afraid of doing a koshering process because the item will get damaged, it doesn't help. Because that means you're not going to do it properly. No, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be very careful. We're going to suspect you're not going to do it properly. So
it's easier to buy a new one.
You're right. It's easier to buy a new one. But remember, you're talking about residential, right? Many times we're talking about industrial or commercial. When we're talking about in commercial, right, every single one of these things, it's a lot of money. You understand? It's not the same as just, that's like telling a person, buy a new oven every single Pesach. Yeah. That's why it's expensive, exactly. You're using it for 10 days, and then again, you would have to do it again. It's not that simple. Fine. Hilkach, therefore, hai buchia, this buchia, which is basically a kli cheres, right? Which is hesekomi bachutzu ve'asur. So the hesek is going to be on the outside, and it's going to be prohibited. Vimalya gumre. So he says, so if it's going to be filled with coals, shapir dami, so then you're allowed to. Which means when you have a kli cheres, right, which is going to be open, and you have it on the outside, it's going to be prohibited. Why? Because at the end of the day, you didn't have it on the inside burning everything. It's on the outside, meaning you have to have the fire on the inside. If the fire's on the outside, it's not going to permit it. So he says, but if you fill it up with coals, so therefore it's going to have on the inside and the outside, it's going to have the coals. So then it's going to be permitted. That's why, by the way, they do nowadays with barbecues. Barbecues, they do the coals on the bottom. They have the racks, and then they put the coals on the tops. That way it's burning on both sides. So that way the entire thing is completely covered with fire. But if not, then you have a problem. Okay? So Amale Ravina Ravashi says Ravina to Ravashi, Hani Sakine bepischa, these knives on Pesach that you want to use on Pesach, how are you going to use them? How are you going to kosher the knives for Pesach? Amale, he told them, he says, for me, right, they were doing new knives. We used to make new knives on Pesach. Amale, he says, Tenach more devshale. Right, but that's only you were able to do that. Meaning, if people have possibilities, sometimes they were rich, sometimes you understand. So that means you're able to do that. You understand? Even some rabbanim, they have a lot of money. So if they have a lot of money, they could buy new things. What's the problem? So he says, but the love shalemai. What about people that they can't afford it? They can't afford every single time to come and start buying new things. So Amalei, so he told them, Ana ke'en chata kamina. Also, my kavanah was not to actually come and say that mamashi was new. It was like new. What does that mean? Katayu betino parzalayhu benura. At the beginning, I cover the yada sakin, the handle, right, with clay. And then afterwards, I come and I start blowing it with the blowtorch, with the fire, right? Behadar, and then afterwards, ma'elene lekatayhu. I used to put the handle with hot water, which means that there's a special deen with then by the way, you should know this exact same halacha applies to the handles of the pots. Do you know that the handles of the pots are not the same as the pot itself? The pot itself, right? What's plastic? Metal. Right? No, even if it's metal. Yeah, because the handles of the pot are not the exact same as the pot in itself. There is a concept by metal that cham mixato cham kulo, which means if part of it is hot, the entire thing is hot. But technically speaking, the isur is only in the actual pot. The handles are not the same. So technically, handles are enough, irui klirishon, which is just pouring hot water from an urn. The actual pot would need, right, the actual hagalah. But the same halacha would apply to handles of a knife. The knife itself, you would have to do the hagalah or the libun here. We're talking about libun. Yeah, but the handle of the knife, why would you have to do libun? That doesn't touch the isur. If it does touch it, everything is cold. The sakin we're going to learn is because when you push the knife down, it's going to press it in. It's going to press in the isur. It's called dochka de sakina. Dochka de sakina means the dochak of the sakin, putting pressure into something. It's going to be mavliya. It's going to absorb it inside. But the handle doesn't have anything. So the handle, you just pour hot water and there's no problem.
You should know that the handle and the sakin.
Yeah, you have to be very, very careful about that. Yeah, that's where the chametz is, exactly. Okay, so he says here, and they put it in rotchin. So what's the halacha? The halacha is that they don't need it at libun at all. All you have to do is you have to take this sakin and you have to put it, whether we're talking about the handle or the actual sakin, you put in a kli rishon and there's no problem. Okay? Amar Ravuna Beredev Yoshua says over Yoshua, etz parur. We're talking about the etz parur. Etz parur is a very big spoon that they mix. It's like a big. It's not a ladle, but but it's a ladle, not a soup ladle, but it's another ladle. It's like the regular I don't know if they call it a different name or it's also called a
wooden
name.
spoon.
It's a wooden spoon. It's a big wooden spoon that they
stir the
to
food.
stir the food. Magilo berotri. You do agala with mayim lotrin with klirishon. Which one? Yeah, wood. Yeah, 100%. So he says over here, why? Kasavar he holds kibolo kach polto. What does it mean? Kibolo kach polto. Just like you absorb, so too you let it out. So the same way, that's a very famous concept in Halachot Kashrut, that the same way that you absorb, you let it out. So that's in a lot of things. For example, that's the reason why by microwaves, that's the heter, pia, whether it's a prima gadim and others as well, that when you absorb, just like the microwave absorbs with steam, so too you kosher it with steam.
Mhm.
So therefore, that's why, how do you do it? According to the
Water.
brothers, you put with water and soap, and then it bubbles up, and all that steam that goes up, besides,
Clean
first
it.
you have to clean it.
Of
First
course.
you clean it.
Of course.
But after cleaning it again with the greaser and everything, you come and the bubbling water comes up and it goes all over the place, so it's actually going to kosher it. Okay, so says the Gemara, right? Right? Hani mani de kunya maulish b'pesach. These klicheres, which is covered with oferet, with lead, with plum, with plomo, right? That means basically this. You have a cheres, earthenware, which is covered with lead, right? Are you allowed to use it on Pesach or not? Yeruka lo tibay lecha. So if it's going to be kelim yerukim, meaning green or yellow utensils, there's no safek. Tivadai asire, but for sure it's going to be asur, right? Why? Because it says here it's made out of adama, right? A shira betzarif, which is like a very, very, for sure it's rich, so therefore for sure it's going to absorb. When is it? When is a question? If it's white or black, what's halacha? Can you use them or not? Or for example, sometimes it has charitzim. Charitzim are like indents. You understand? So lo tibay lecha is not a question. But for sure it's going to be a sur. Ki tibay lecha deshiyeh, if it's going to be chalak, if it's going to be very smooth. What's halacha? So amar lehu, so he comes and he answers chazina lehu diminaitu, right? I actually saw that they were mazini bachutz when they actually come and they were sweating. There was liquid coming out of it when they were cooking it. Alma sisi bale ve'asire, so it absorbs and therefore it's going to be asur. HaTorah heida kli cheres she'eni yotze midei dofio leolam, and the Torah already testified on kli cheres that it never comes out. That means on the earthenware utensils, it never 100% comes out of the utensils. By the way, you should know even nowadays things have changed a lot. For example, in metal, there's a famous Rafoifer in the name of Rav Moshe Feinstein that he comes and he says, do you know that libun, in order to do libun, you had to have chispas coming out. You had to sparks coming out. That means you would put the hot fire and then it would be sparks coming out of the metal. Nowadays, you don't have that. And many times you don't even have that. It becomes red hot. Like what's going on exactly? So the answer that the metal nowadays is made so condensed. Once upon a time, when the metal wasn't made so condensed, so what happened? When you were putting it used to come out, the food was coming out. So that was the sparks that were coming out. Nowadays, the metal is made so condensed that you don't have that coming out. So because of that, all you have to do is you have to have it at a certain level, whether it's going to be 375 degrees or 400 degrees, right? So 300, and I think it was 375 or 400 degrees Celsius. Celsius, remember, Celsius, not Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit is nothing. We used to do that in Europe. Everything is Celsius, so it's much stronger. I remember we used to have our ovens at 350 Celsius, not 350 Fahrenheit. Here, everything is Fahrenheit. So even if you put it 355 Fahrenheit, it's nothing in compared to what Be'emet it was. You understand? It's half. It's a different world. You understand? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's yeah. So he says over here, right, like this. So he says, so he comes and he says like this. He says that the fact that it doesn't come out at all from the kli cheres. So the Gemara is going to ask, so what? Why is it then by yain nesech we didn't prohibit the utensils, right? The Darish Meneimar, but Meneimar said, mani de kunya, these utensils of yain nesech of kli cheres, ben uchma ben chivre, doesn't matter whether they're white, green, or black, right? Shadi, they're all permitted, and we didn't say there's a problem with yain nesech. Yain nesech is wine of the goyim. If wine of the goyim goes into a pot and it stays there for a while, it gets absorbed. That means you should never be able to come. Sorry, I thought it was mine. Right? You should never be able to come and you should never be able to use it. It's klicheres. So why is it permitted? Why isn't it prohibited? You shouldn't be able to use what? You're allowed. So the question is why? Now, if you're going to tell me in 1 second, yain nesech is only the rabbanan. Chametz is doraita. So he says, yeah, but kol tekat dakun rabbanan ken doraita tikun. Whatever the rabbis instituted, they did it like doraita. So answers the Gemara, no, there's a difference. You know why? Amar lehu zet hashmishol yedei chamim vezet hashmon yedei tzonen. Chametz is in hot. Klicheres of the wine is in cold. So because it's in cold, you can't compare cold and hot. You understand? The klicheres of a wine is always cold. We're not talking about you're cooking it in those barrels or you're cooking it in those utensils. It's about cold. Cold and hot are two completely different worlds. So
if an open bottle gets touched by a goy,
No, that's something completely
No,
different.
no, I'm just saying.
That's something completely different. Because then the wine becomes prohibited. So the wine becomes prohibited. That's yain nesech. So then you have to throw out the wine. Yes.
If you take that wine and you put it in a heating kettle, it's kosher.
Right. So it's not going to prohibit the kli cheres.
So you're allowed to use it.
You're allowed to use the kli
You
afterwards.
clean it and just use it.
Yes.
No, not for your.
Huh?
For your
For sure, you're not allowed to.
glass.
Halacha l'maaseh, for sure, you're not allowed to.
Ah, okay.
Because we're going to say also that there's going to be very problematic also, because we're going to learn, I don't know if we're actually going to learn it here or not, but there's also a concept of, how do you call it? Of, if you leave it for a long time in a utensil, even in cold, kavush kumushal, that it stays, it also gets absorbed in the utensil. So, but I don't think we're going to mention it here, but this is just the concept. So, Amar Rabba bar Abba, Amar Rabchia bar Ashi, Amar Shmuel. Says Rabba bar Abba, right? The name of Rabchia bar Ashi, name of Shmuel. Kol ha'kelim sheyishamshu b'hem chametz b'tzonen. Anything that you use cold and tzonen, mishamesh b'hem matzah, you're allowed to use it in matzah. Since used in cold, you're allowed to use it in matzah. Chutz min bet seor, except for the bet seor, which is basically where they made the leaven. Why? Because since it's so strong, it would absorb even in a cold utensil. Okay, but it's intense. So it says, Amar Rashi, Rashi says, the bet charoset, also the bet charoset, which means the utensils which they put things which are chamutz. Why chamutz? Because it's very, very sharp. Right? Also remember, kavush kivushal usually is 24 hours. By anything which is charif, it's 18 minutes according to some shittot. Which means something which could take 24 hours until it absorbs in the utensil. Here, by something which is sharp, 18 minutes, and according to some shittot, it already gets it. Yeah, it's like imamash, it gets absorbed inside. So Amar Rava says,
like lemon.
Right, like lemon and all these things are sharp. Hani agne de mechuza. These karot gedolot, which are these are big bowls which they use for batzek, for kneading, for dough in mechuza. Since they always use it for seor, umashu beuchamina, and they leave the seor there. It's like the bet seor, and therefore you're not allowed to use it even on Pesach. So it says the Gemara, obviously pshita. So it says the Gemara, no. I would have thought say given the revicha, since it's they're very, very big. Shali be'uavida, there's a lot of air coming through. Velo bale, and therefore it's not going to absorb the chametz. Kamashmanan comes teach you that it still absorbs the chametz, because since it's so hard, meaning it's such a not hard as a solid, hard as strong. You understand? Since it's so strong, it penetrates the taste, and it penetrates inside, even though there's a lot of air. Says the Mishnah. Okay, we're on the Mishnah on the bottom of Lamed Amud Bet. Okay, says the Mishnah. Nochri shilvat Yisrael chametzo. Imagine right now, he lent money to a Jew before Pesach, and he shibelo Yisrael his chametz, right? He made him. So basically, what happens is the goy lends money to the Jew, and the Jew gives us his security, his chametz. So achara Pesach, after the Pesach, mutar bana. This chametz you're allowed to benefit. Why? Because this is a chametz of a goy. Because since it belonged to the goy, because technically I owed him money, but so it belongs to the goy. So the same thing. Yisrael should be, but if it was the other way around, that the Yisrael lends money to the goy, and the goy now gives him the food, the chametz. So now after the Pesach, it's going to be a sulbana. Why? Because it's considered my chametz. Because since I don't have my money, the chametz is mine until I don't get the money. So says the Gemara, Itmar, it was stated, Balchov, when we were talking about a malveh, Abaye says, Mafrea ugove. Right, which means that to do with the, he's talking about the mafrea. What does it mean? When you're going to come and you're going to start collecting a debt, right? When you're collecting it, it comes out that you go to mafrea. Mafrea means that we're going back from the beginning of the time, retroactively, that it was yours. And Rava says, mikanu laba, right, hu gove, that you're only collecting from now onwards. That means from the time that you're collecting, right now you're collecting. You don't go retroactively. Okay, and there's going to be a whole bunch of machlokot, exactly what we're talking about. So, Blina, that we'll just start from the Gemara again tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.